Hello everyone, my name is Nisha and I am the YogicAmnesiac. Today we're going to be talking about how to practice yoga when you're on a really tight budget. With all the brand names out there associated with yoga, it can be pretty intimidating to try to get into a practice if you don't have that much money to spend. But it's really not that expensive to actually practice yoga. It's just that we happen to have a lot of brand names associated with us. So don't let those scare you and come join me and we'll figure out some ways to maybe do yoga without spending a lot of money. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about today involves asking the question, what is really necessary to our practice? And at the end of the day, usually it's nothing at all. You could practice butt naked in the middle of a forest and you'd still be doing yoga, right? That being said, practicing completely nude in the middle of somewhere is not necessarily comfortable for all of us, so I'm going to offer you a few alternatives that work well for just about anyone, and you should have everything in your house to do any of these already. So first, let's talk about yoga mats. Yoga mats are something that I recommend you invest money into if you're going to get one. You can get a really cheap one, but they disintegrate, they'll fall apart, they don't work that well, and you'll end up having to replace it sooner rather than later anyway, so maybe hold off on that and use these alternatives until you can invest in a nicer mat. For some people, you may even find that you like these alternatives more than you like a traditional yoga mat. And actually in India, they usually just roll out a towel anyway. So there's your first alternative. Just use a towel. Those hardcore yogis you see practicing in India with the long beards and whatnot, they just use towels or nothing at all. So why not go back to our roots and practice yoga the way we're supposed to? You can also practice using a blanket or an area rug. I think a blanket might be kind of, worrisome along with a towel. If you're practicing on a hardwood floor or something like that, it might slip. So be careful there, but if you're on grass or on a carpet, it's absolutely doable to use a towel or a blanket. An area rug is really nice because it gives you a lot of space and they generally don't slip because they're made not to slip. I used to have a bedroom with tile floors, which was terrible, but I had an area rug so I could practice yoga on it, and that was fantastic. And I could even roll out my mat on top of the area rug and feel like I was practicing on something a little bit nicer than tile. And if your floor is clean, safe, and comfortable, just practice on the floor. If your floor is already carpeted and you've kept it pretty clean, you might want to vacuum or something, why not just practice? You can also do that on hardwood floors. Alright, next let's talk about props. Outside of the studio, I don't know too many people who use props unless they've really been practicing yoga, in which case they might have a few here or there, but even then they don't necessarily use them all the time. I've definitely noticed that the few people who do have props in their house, like blocks or bolsters, tend to have more of a disposable income. People like college students, or maybe if you just don't have that extra cash, don't really have props, and there's not really a need. There are tons of alternatives. So in a studio, you should find bolsters, blocks, blankets, and straps, and those are pretty much your basics, and they're all really easy to replace. Except for blankets, just use a blanket. If you don't want to use a blanket or you have one that's too big, you can again use things like towels, especially if you're just going to use it to roll it up. You can also use things like pillows. They often are really good to replace bolsters. You might need to stack two up to get the same firmness that some bolsters have, but that's something you can play around with and find what you like more. I've also found an abundance of uses for body pillows in yoga, so if you have an extra long pillow, absolutely play around with it and practice with it. Instead of a block, you can use a book. And maybe don't use your library book or something like that, maybe use one that you already own, but generally you can just use a book, place your hand on it for support or something like that, or if you need to sit on a block, place down a dictionary or a large book and put a blanket or towel over it so it's a little bit softer. Lastly, you can replace straps with a lot of different things. I recommend belts if you have those cloth belts that aren't too stretchy. Those are usually the best, and honestly they're often made out of the exact same material. You can use just about anything though. I've even suggested using t-shirts and stuff like that, but again, like I said, not too stretchy is better, so maybe like a cotton shirt or something like that, but really anything works. Okay, so now we have all the stuff to do yoga with, but now you need to create or choose a space to do yoga in. So really all you need is enough room to do yoga. That might be at the foot of your bed, that might be in another room in your house, a living room. You might want to push the table out of the dining room and even do it there. There are also a few things you can do to go that extra mile to add a little bit extra comfort to your practice. You can turn on and off lights in your house as you see fit to kind of illuminate certain areas, keep it as dim as you want, as bright as you want. Obviously this would be great if you had a dimmer, but most people don't have dimmers in their house. It might be a good idea to light candles if you have candles, and if you don't, usually they're pretty cheap and you can get really tiny ones, and all you need to do is put them in a bowl, or you can just set them around the house. If you're willing to spend a little money, maybe you can even get a plant. So if you're trying to create a nice space to do yoga, think about things that make you happy, things that would be comfortable. Maybe it would be hanging a cloth that you already have in your house from some area or something like that. There's a ton of options, so play around with that, and just remember, you do not need a whole room dedicated to yoga. Finally, let's talk about classes. Most yoga studios offer classes that can be super expensive, or those little expenses really build up over time. It's not really their fault, they do have to create revenue, but there are options out there if you're just not able to shell out that cash. Obviously, if you're here, you know my answer: videos. There are tons of yoga videos out there. I obviously make them, but there are so many other people too. So you don't even have to feel like you're stuck with one instructor. You can always mix it up. Videos are a great free resource, and it still helps us make money if you're watching them and you're watching the ads and liking the videos. So it's actually a terrific experience for both of us. If you do have some money to shell out, or maybe you're a student or something like that, look at a community college or your university. Sometimes they offer yoga classes and they won't be that expensive. Keep in mind that if you are a student, they can't affect your grade unless you take it like pass, no pass or something like that. If you're not a student, you can still always enroll in classes at community colleges, and it doesn't matter if you have a grade then that's good or not. So you can go when you see fit. Just make sure you tell your instructor what you're up to. It might be worth it to look at your local yoga studio and see what their drop-in rates are like. I've seen classes where the drop-in rate was only $5, which is not that bad, especially if you're not going all the time. Some places it's super expensive, but it's still worth looking into if you want to drop into a class occasionally. Look for free classes. I've seen yoga done in parks, museums, libraries, anything, and they're all for free, so why not try looking for those? Just because they're free doesn't mean they're lower quality or anything like that. And if you have friends who are into yoga, you can always practice with them. And if your friends are advanced, they may even be able to help you with a little bit of instruction or something like that. And if you're advanced, maybe you can help your friends with instruction. Keep in mind, though, if your friend is a yoga instructor, it's not always fair to ask them for free classes. They do need to get paid for what they do, and this is, their livelihood. If you do have friends who are instructors, it's definitely worth it to ask them if they're willing to practice with you and if they're willing to do it for free. It's also always really nice to offer to compensate them in some way, even if it's just getting them dinner. If your friend is a yoga instructor and they've created a new routine, they might want to try it out on you, though, so why not offer your services like that? It might also be worth asking if they can offer you discounted rates at a studio, though keep in mind that's up to the owner of the studio, not necessarily the instructors. And if they're offering private lessons, maybe you and a friend can get a discounted rate from them and then split the cost. So those are my tips and tricks to doing yoga for super cheap, on a budget, or for free. Leave a comment down below if there's anything else you're concerned with or struggling with, or you just want to say hello. Don't forget to like this video, it really helps us out and lets me know that you like what's going on. And subscribe, it's the best way for YouTube to let you know if I've released any new videos. Namaste.